The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of Westminster Abbey, creating patterns of light and shadow across the ancient stone floor. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before the ornate mirror in her private chamber, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the delicate fabric of her coronation gown. The ivory silk seemed to shimmer with each breath she took, and the intricate embroidery told stories of England's rich history through golden threads and precious stones. Her mind wandered back to the very first time she had walked through these sacred halls as a young woman, never imagining that one day she would return for such a momentous occasion. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than any crown could ever be. She thought about her children, sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their mother was about to make history alongside their father. William entered the chamber quietly, his own ceremonial robes flowing behind him like waves of deep blue velvet. His face showed the same mixture of anticipation and nervousness that Catherine felt in her heart. They had practiced this moment countless times, rehearsed every step, every gesture, every word, yet nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of what lay ahead. "Are you ready for this?" William asked softly, his voice carrying decades of preparation and a lifetime of love for the woman standing before him. His eyes met hers in the mirror's reflection, and, in that moment, they were not the future king and queen of England, but simply two people who had found their way to each other through all of life's unexpected turns. Catherine turned to face him, her smile warm despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. "I've been ready since the moment I said yes to you," she replied, her voice steady with conviction. The truth of those words surprised even her. Through all the years of public scrutiny, private challenges, and personal growth, she had indeed been preparing for this day without even realizing it. The sound of bells began to ring across London, their ancient voices calling the nation to witness this historic moment. Citizens from every corner of the United Kingdom had traveled to be part of this celebration, while millions more around the world would watch from their homes, their hearts connected to this abbey through shared hope and tradition. Lady Susan, Catherine's longtime dresser and confidant, approached with the final pieces of the ensemble. The tiara that had been specially crafted for this occasion caught the light like captured starlight, each diamond telling its own story of the earth's ancient patience. As it was placed gently upon Catherine's head, she felt the weight of not just precious metals and stones, but of centuries of women who had worn similar symbols of service and dedication. "Your Royal Highness," Lady Susan whispered with tears in her eyes, "you look absolutely radiant." The older woman had served the royal family for decades and had seen many grand occasions, but there was something uniquely special about this moment that moved her deeply. William adjusted his ceremonial sash one final time, the golden threads gleaming against the rich fabric of his uniform. He had worn many formal outfits throughout his life, but none had carried the significance of what he wore today. Each medal, each decoration, each carefully placed element told the story of his journey from young prince to the man who would soon stand before God and country to accept the greatest responsibility of his life. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors outside their chamber as the procession began to form. Nobility from across the Commonwealth had gathered, their own ceremonial dress creating a river of color and tradition that would soon flow through the abbey's ancient aisles. Each person present understood that they were witnesses to history, participants in a ceremony that connected them to 1,000 years of tradition while pointing toward a future full of promise. Catherine's mother, Carol, appeared in the doorway, her own emotions barely contained as she looked upon her daughter. The woman who had once been told that her daughter's relationship with the prince would never lead to marriage now saw that same daughter preparing to become queen. The journey had been long, sometimes difficult, but always filled with love and determination. "My darling girl," Carol whispered, embracing Catherine carefully so as not to disturb the perfect arrangement of her gown. "Your father and I are so proud of you, not for this moment, but for the woman you've become along the way." The words brought tears to Catherine's eyes, but she blinked them back, knowing that millions of people would be watching every expression, every gesture, every emotion that crossed her face. She had learned long ago how to carry herself with grace under the most intense scrutiny, but today felt different. Today, the eyes of the world would see not just a princess, but a woman stepping into her destiny. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, entered the chamber with the gravity and warmth that had marked his own long journey to the throne. His eyes held a mixture of paternal pride and the wisdom that came from decades of preparation for leadership. He had watched William grow from a young boy grappling with unimaginable loss into a man ready to serve his people with dedication and compassion. "Son," he said, placing a firm hand on William's shoulder, "your mother would be so proud of the man you've become and the woman you've chosen to stand beside you." The mention of Princess Diana brought a moment of profound silence to the room, her spirit felt by all who had loved her. William nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I feel her with us today," he said quietly. "In every step we take, in every promise we make, her love continues to guide us forward." The Archbishop of Canterbury appeared at the threshold, his ancient vestments rustling softly as he prepared to lead them to their moment of transformation. His face carried the serenity that came from a lifetime spent in service to both God and country, and his presence brought a sense of sacred purpose to the preparations. "Their Royal Highnesses," he said with deep reverence, "it is time." Catherine took one last look around the chamber that had witnessed her transformation from princess to queen-to-be. The mirror reflected back a woman she almost didn't recognize, not because she looked different, but because she could see in her own eyes the strength and determination that had been growing within her for years. She thought about the shy young woman who had first caught William's attention at university, the woman who had learned to navigate the complexities of royal life while maintaining her own identity and values. The journey had shaped her, challenged her, and ultimately prepared her for this moment when she would promise to serve not just as William's wife, but as a leader in her own right. The sound of the great organ began to fill the abbey, its majestic voice calling all present to witness the sacred ceremony about to unfold. The music seemed to rise from the very stones of the building, carrying with it the prayers and hopes of generations who had stood in this same place, making similar promises of service and dedication. William offered his arm to Catherine, and together they began their walk toward their destiny. Each step echoed through the corridors, marking time between their past and their future. The weight of their robes, the presence of history all around them, the knowledge that millions of people were waiting to witness this moment, all of it combined to create an experience that transcended the ordinary boundaries of human experience. As they approached the great doors of the abbey, they could hear the murmur of the assembled congregation, representatives from every walk of life who had come to be part of this historic day. Catherine's heart swelled with gratitude for all the people who had supported them on their journey, who had believed in their ability to serve with honor and compassion. The doors opened before them, and the full majesty of Westminster Abbey revealed itself in all its glory. Sunlight streamed through ancient stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the faces of the 1,000 guests who rose as one to acknowledge their arrival. The sight was breathtaking, overwhelming, and deeply humbling all at once. Catherine felt William's hand tighten slightly on her arm, a gesture of support and shared determination that spoke louder than any words could. They were about to embark on the final phase of their journey to the throne, and they would face it together, just as they had faced every challenge and celebration that had brought them to this moment. The organ music swelled to fill every corner of the ancient building, and Catherine knew that this was not just an ending, but a beginning. The woman who would walk back down this aisle in an hour's time would be forever changed, forever bound to a promise of service that would define the rest of her life. But in this moment, as she prepared to take the first step toward that transformation, Catherine felt only peace, love, and an unshakable faith in the rightness of the path that lay ahead. The grand procession began as William and Catherine stepped into the main aisle of Westminster Abbey, their footsteps creating a rhythm that seemed to match the beating hearts of everyone present. The ancient stones beneath their feet had witnessed countless coronations, royal weddings, and moments of national significance, but today felt uniquely special, charged with an energy that rippled through the assembled congregation like electricity. Catherine's train flowed behind her like liquid silk, its length requiring careful navigation as she moved with the grace that had become her trademark over years of public appearances. But this was different from any public appearance she had ever made. Today, every step carried the weight of destiny. Every breath marked her transition from princess to queen-elect. The faces in the congregation told the story of modern Britain in all its diversity. She saw former prime ministers sitting beside charity workers she had met during her years of royal duties. Commonwealth leaders shared pews with teachers, doctors, and volunteers who represented the very best of public service. Children from the school she had visited peered wide-eyed from special seats, their faces bright with excitement and wonder. As they walked deeper into the abbey, Catherine noticed familiar faces in the crowd. Her university friends, now successful in their own careers, watched with tears in their eyes as they remembered the young woman who had studied art history and harbored dreams that seemed impossible at the time. Her childhood friends from Bucklebury sat with her extended family, their presence a reminder of the roots that had kept her grounded through all the changes in her life. William walked beside her with the bearing of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life, yet Catherine could sense the emotion he was working to contain. She knew he was thinking about his mother, about the empty chair where she should have been sitting, about the grandmother who had shaped his understanding of duty and service. The weight of family history and personal loss mingled with the joy of the moment in ways that made every step feel both triumphant and bittersweet. The Dean of Westminster stood at the altar, his voice carrying across the abbey as he began the ancient words that would guide the ceremony. The Latin phrases, unchanged for centuries, connected this moment to every coronation that had come before, creating an unbroken chain of tradition that stretched back through the mists of history. King Charles III watched from his place of honor, his own memories undoubtedly turning to the day when he had walked down this same aisle to receive his own crown. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable, but so was the understanding of what his son and daughter-in-law were about to undertake. The burden of kingship was one he knew intimately, and seeing it pass to the next generation brought both relief and a deep sense of continuity. Catherine's children sat in the front row, their faces serious with the importance of the occasion, but still bright with the natural curiosity of youth. George, as the future heir, seemed to understand the significance of what he was witnessing, while Charlotte and Louis absorbed the pageantry with wide eyes and careful attention to their best behavior. Their presence reminded everyone that this ceremony was not just about the present, but about the future of the monarchy and the continuity of service across generations. The music of the abbey choir rose and fell like ocean waves, their voices trained to perfection and their hearts fully committed to marking this sacred moment with beauty that matched its significance. Each note seemed to lift the ceremony beyond the merely earthly, creating a bridge between human aspiration and divine blessing that had been the hallmark of coronations for over 1,000 years. As they reached the central point of the abbey, Catherine felt the full weight of the nation's attention focused upon her. Television cameras captured every angle, every expression, every nuance of movement, but she had learned long ago how to exist naturally within such scrutiny. The woman walking down this aisle had been shaped by years of public service, countless engagements, and the constant balance between private person and public figure. She thought about the letters that arrived daily at the palace, many from children who saw her as a role model, women who drew strength from her example, and families who had been touched by the charitable work she had championed. The responsibility to those people felt as real and immediate as the weight of the crown that would soon rest upon her head. The Commonwealth representatives in attendance reminded her that this ceremony was about more than Britain alone. Nations across the globe looked to the British monarchy for stability, tradition, and moral leadership in an increasingly uncertain world. The promises she and William were about to make would echo across continents, touching the lives of people in cultures vastly different from their own, yet united by shared values and common membership in the Commonwealth family. Archbishop Welby stepped forward as they approached the altar, his presence commanding immediate reverence from all assembled. His role in this ceremony connected the monarchs to be not just with earthly authority, but with spiritual responsibility. The Church of England's relationship with the crown had shaped British history for centuries, and today that ancient partnership would be renewed with fresh promises and contemporary understanding. The altar itself was adorned with flowers from across the United Kingdom, each bloom carefully chosen to represent different regions and communities. Scottish heather mingled with Welsh daffodils. English roses shared space with Northern Irish shamrocks, creating a living symbol of unity and diversity that characterized the nation William and Catherine were preparing to serve. Catherine caught sight of her wedding dress designer among the congregation, the woman who had created the gown that had captivated the world over a decade earlier. Today's coronation dress was equally stunning but different in its symbolism, representing not the beginning of a marriage but the culmination of years of preparation for the highest service their country could offer. The sound of cameras clicking was barely audible beneath the organ music, but Catherine knew that every moment was being captured for history. Future generations would study these images, analyze these expressions, and draw their own conclusions about the people who had accepted the crown on this day. The thought was both humbling and inspiring, a reminder that their actions would ripple through time in ways they could barely imagine. William's military training was evident in his bearing as they approached the moment of truth. Years of service had taught him about leadership, sacrifice, and the weight of responsibility for others' lives. Those lessons had prepared him not just for kingship, but for the kind of kingship that modern Britain needed, one grounded in service rather than privilege, in duty rather than entitlement. The foreign dignitaries present represented the complexity of modern international relations. Presidents, prime ministers, and monarchs from around the world had traveled to witness this ceremony, their presence a testament to Britain's continued importance on the global stage. The relationships William and Catherine would build with these leaders would shape international cooperation for decades to come. As they drew closer to the altar, Catherine felt a moment of perfect clarity about the path that had brought her to this point. Every challenge she had faced, every criticism she had endured, every moment of doubt and growth had been preparation for this ultimate test of character and commitment. The shy young woman who had once worried about public speaking was about to make promises before the entire world with confidence born of experience and inner strength. The ancient stones of the abbey seemed to pulse with the accumulated weight of history, as if all the prayers, promises, and sacred moments that had taken place within these walls were converging on this single moment. Catherine could almost feel the presence of all the queens who had come before her, their wisdom and experience offering guidance and strength for the challenges that lay ahead. The congregation fell into complete silence as William and Catherine reached the altar, the only sounds the whisper of fabric and the soft echo of their footsteps on stone. This moment of silence felt like the entire nation holding its breath, waiting for the transformation that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their shared history. Catherine looked up at the soaring arches above them, architectural marvels that had inspired countless generations to reach beyond themselves towards something greater. The beauty and permanence of the abbey reminded her that while individual reigns might end, the institution they were about to join was designed to endure across centuries, adapting to new challenges while maintaining its core commitment to service and stability. The moment had arrived when preparation would give way to reality, when years of waiting and wondering would crystallize into action and commitment. Catherine felt William's presence beside her like an anchor in the storm of emotion and significance that swirled around them, his steady strength a reminder that they would face whatever came next together, just as they had faced everything else in their remarkable journey to this altar. The Archbishop of Canterbury raised his hands, and Westminster Abbey fell into a profound silence that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of the ancient building itself. In that moment of perfect quiet, Catherine felt the full magnitude of what was about to happen settle upon her like a mantle woven from centuries of tradition, responsibility, and hope. "Dearly beloved," the Archbishop began, his voice carrying clearly through every corner of the abbey, "we are gathered here in the sight of God, and before this congregation to witness and participate in the coronation of William Arthur Philip Lewis as king and Catherine Elizabeth as queen, recognizing the solemn promises they make to serve their people with dedication, wisdom, and unwavering commitment." The words seemed to echo not just through the stone walls, but through time itself, connecting this moment to every coronation that had come before while marking it as uniquely significant for the modern world. Catherine felt the weight of those words settle into her heart, each syllable a reminder of the promises she was about to make not just to her country, but to future generations who would inherit the world she and William would help shape. William stood perfectly still beside her, but Catherine could sense the controlled emotion beneath his composure. She knew he was thinking about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had worn the crown with such grace and dignity for over 70 years. The lessons she had taught him about duty, service, and the careful balance between personal desire and public responsibility had shaped every aspect of his preparation for this moment. The St. Edward's crown was brought forward on a velvet cushion, its ancient gold gleaming in the light that streamed through the abbey's stained glass windows. This crown had crowned English monarchs for nearly 1,000 years, its weight both physical and metaphorical representing the continuous thread of history that connected William to every king who had come before him. William, the Archbishop continued, do you solemnly promise and swear to govern the people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and your other realms and territories to their respective laws and customs? I solemnly promise so to do, William replied, his voice strong and clear, carrying across the abbey and into the hearts of millions watching around the world. Catherine felt a surge of pride and love for the man beside her, the same person who had once struggled with the burden of his destiny but had grown into someone who could embrace it with genuine enthusiasm for service. The ritual continued with ancient formulas and modern adaptations, each element carefully preserved to maintain the sacred nature of the ceremony while ensuring its relevance to contemporary society. Catherine watched as William answered each question with growing confidence, his voice becoming stronger with each promise made, each commitment accepted. When the moment came for the actual crowning, the entire abbey seemed to hold its breath once more. The Archbishop lifted St. Edward's crown high above William's head, the ancient gold catching the light and casting patterns of brilliance across the assembled congregation. The weight of the crown represented not just the burden of kingship, but the accumulated wisdom, traditions, and hopes of a nation. Be thy head anointed with holy oil, the Archbishop intoned as he lowered the crown onto William's head, as kings, priests, and prophets were anointed. And as Solomon was anointed king by Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet, so be you anointed, blessed, and consecrated king over the peoples whom the Lord your God has given you to rule and govern. The moment the crown touched William's head, Catherine felt a shift in the very air around them, as if the world itself was acknowledging the transition from prince to king. She watched his face, seeing not triumph but a deep sense of responsibility settle over his features. This was the man she had fallen in love with at university, but now he carried within himself the authority and obligation of kingship. Then came her own moment of transformation. The queen consort's crown, specially created for this occasion and set with diamonds that had adorned royal crowns for generations, was brought forward on its own cushion. Catherine felt her heart race as she realized that in moments, she would be transformed from Princess of Wales to Queen Catherine, a title that carried with it responsibilities she had been preparing for but could never fully understand until she actually bore them. Catherine, the Archbishop addressed her directly, and she felt the attention of the entire world focus upon her with laser-like intensity. You have been chosen to stand beside the king as his partner in service to the people of this realm and the Commonwealth. Do you promise to support him in his sacred duties, to serve the people with compassion and wisdom, and to uphold the values and traditions that have guided this monarchy through centuries of change and challenge? I do solemnly promise, Catherine replied, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. The words seemed to come from somewhere deep within her, from a place of conviction that had been growing stronger with each year of preparation for this moment. She thought about all the people she had met during her royal duties, the children who had looked up to her, the family she had comforted, the community she had supported, and she knew that her promise was made not just to abstract concepts of crown and country, but to real people with real lives who deserved leaders committed to their welfare. As the queen consort's crown was placed upon her head, Catherine felt a transformation that went beyond the physical weight of precious metals and stones. The crown seemed to connect her to every queen who had worn similar symbols of service, from the medieval queens who had helped shape the nation to the more recent monarchs who had guided Britain through world wars and social transformation. The abbey erupted in a carefully orchestrated moment of celebration as both crowns were finally in place. God Save the King rang out from hundreds of voices, the ancient acclamation that had marked the beginning of new reigns for centuries. The sound seemed to rise from the very stones of the building, carrying with it the hopes and prayers of a nation looking toward the future with optimism. Catherine looked out at the congregation and saw faces wet with tears of joy and emotion. Her own parents sat in the front row, their faces glowing with pride and amazement at the journey their daughter had traveled. From a middle-class family in Berkshire to the throne of England, it was a story that seemed impossible even as it unfolded before their eyes. The bells of Westminster Abbey began to ring, their bronze voices joining with church bells across London and throughout the United Kingdom in a cascade of celebration that would continue for hours. The sound seemed to lift the ceremony beyond the confines of the ancient building, carrying news of the new king and queen to every corner of the realm and beyond. King Charles III stepped forward to offer the first formal recognition of his son's new status, bowing deeply before the new king in a gesture that marked the peaceful transition of power from one generation to the next. The moment was profoundly moving, representing not just personal relationships, but the constitutional principle that had kept Britain stable through centuries of change. Catherine caught sight of her children in the front row, their faces serious with the understanding that their lives had just changed in ways they were still too young to fully comprehend. George, now second in line to the throne, sat with the dignity befitting his new position, while Charlotte and Louis watched with the wide-eyed wonder of children witnessing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. The foreign dignitaries present rose as one to acknowledge the new monarchs, their gesture representing the international recognition of William and Catherine's new roles. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and queens, all united in this moment of celebration that transcended national boundaries and political differences. As the formal ceremony began to wind toward its conclusion, Catherine felt a deep sense of completion, as if all the disparate elements of her life had finally come together in perfect harmony. The young woman who had studied art history, the princess who had learned to navigate public life, the mother who had raised her children with love and care, and the future queen who had prepared for this moment. All of these aspects of herself were now unified in service to something greater than any individual ambition. The communion service that followed the crowning brought a spiritual dimension to the ceremony that touched Catherine deeply. As she knelt beside William to receive the sacrament, she felt connected not just to the traditions of monarchy, but to the faith that had sustained British monarchs through centuries of triumph and trial. The final prayers of the ceremony seemed to wrap around the new king and queen like a protective blessing, the archbishop's words calling upon divine guidance for the challenges that lay ahead. Catherine closed her eyes and felt the presence of all those who had supported her journey to this moment: family, friends, mentors, and even critics who had helped her grow stronger and more resilient. As the ceremony reached its crescendo, Catherine realized that this was not an ending, but a true beginning. The woman who would walk out of Westminster Abbey in a few minutes would be forever changed, forever bound to a promise of service that would define the rest of her life. But she was ready for that transformation, eager to embrace the opportunities and responsibilities that came with the crown that now rested upon her head. As the final blessing echoed through Westminster Abbey, King William and Queen Catherine rose from their places before the altar, their movements now carrying the dignity and authority that came with their new titles. The transformation was complete, but the magnitude of what had just occurred was still settling into their consciousness like morning mist slowly clearing to reveal a changed landscape. The recessional music began, its triumphant notes marking not just the end of the ceremony, but the beginning of their reign. Catherine felt the weight of her crown with each step, not as a burden but as a reminder of the promises she had just made. The eyes of the congregation followed their progress back down the aisle, each face reflecting the wonder and hope that marked this historic moment. William's bearing had subtly changed during the ceremony, and Catherine could see in his posture and expression the emergence of the king he had been born to become. Years of preparation, decades of waiting, and a lifetime of understanding his destiny had culminated in this transformation that went beyond the mere placing of a crown upon his head. He carried himself now with the authority of kingship, but also with the humility that came from understanding the true nature of his role as servant to his people. As they processed back through the abbey, Catherine's eyes found familiar faces in the congregation, each one representing a different chapter in her remarkable journey. Her university friends, who had watched her navigate the transition from student to princess with grace and determination. Her childhood friends from Bucklebury, who had known her before titles and protocol became part of her daily life. Royal staff members who had supported her through years of public service, their faces glowing with pride at seeing her achieve this ultimate recognition. The Commonwealth representatives in attendance reminded her that this ceremony had implications far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. As Queen Catherine, she would now serve not just British subjects, but millions of people across the globe who looked to the British monarchy for stability, tradition, and moral leadership. The weight of that responsibility felt both daunting and inspiring. King Charles III watched from his seat as his son and daughter-in-law passed by, his expression mixing paternal pride with the relief of seeing his life's work successfully passed to the next generation. The peaceful transition of power represented everything the monarchy stood for: continuity, stability, and the ability to adapt to changing times while maintaining core values and traditions. The children's section drew Catherine's attention as she passed, their young faces bright with excitement and wonder at the pageantry they were witnessing. Many of these children came from schools she had visited during her years as Princess of Wales, their presence a reminder of her commitment to education, youth development, and the importance of inspiring the next generation to believe in their own potential for positive change. The media presence was overwhelming but carefully managed, with cameras positioned to capture every moment for the millions watching around the world. Catherine had long ago learned to exist naturally within such intense scrutiny, but today felt different. Today, every image captured would become part of history, studied and analyzed by future generations seeking to understand this pivotal moment in the monarchy's evolution. As they approached the Abbey's great doors, Catherine could hear the sounds of celebration from outside, the cheers of crowds who had waited for hours to catch a glimpse of their new king and queen, the peal of bells from churches across London, the distant sound of military bands playing triumphant music. The entire city seemed to be rejoicing, and the energy was infectious. The doors swung open to reveal a sight that took Catherine's breath away. The streets were lined with people as far as the eye could see, their faces upturned in joy and celebration, their hands waving flags and banners that created a sea of red, white, and blue stretching into the distance. The roar of approval that greeted their appearance was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a wall of sound that seemed to lift the very air around them. The Golden State coach waited at the Abbey's entrance, its magnificent craftsmanship gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. This historic vehicle had carried monarchs to and from their coronations for over 2 centuries, and now it would carry William and Catherine on their first journey as king and queen through the streets of London to Buckingham Palace. As they settled into the coach's plush interior, Catherine felt a moment of surreal disbelief at how far she had traveled from her modest beginnings. The young woman who had grown up in a comfortable but ordinary middle-class family was now sitting in a golden carriage as Queen of England, preparing to wave to millions of her subjects from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. The procession began with military precision, the household cavalry providing a spectacular escort as the coach began its stately progress through the streets of London. The crowds pressed forward against the barriers, their enthusiasm evident in every cheer, every wave, every photograph taken to commemorate this historic day. William reached over and took Catherine's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture of mutual support and shared amazement at the journey they had completed together. "We did it," he said softly, his words barely audible above the crowd's roar. "We actually did it." Catherine squeezed his hand in response, her heart full of love for the man who had become her partner not just in marriage but in the greatest adventure of service their lives could offer. "Together," she replied, the simple word carrying within it all the promise and commitment of their shared future. The route to Buckingham Palace had been carefully planned to allow maximum visibility for the crowds while ensuring security and smooth progress. As they turned onto the Mall, the sight that greeted them was breathtaking, a river of people stretching from Admiralty Arch to the palace gates, their faces bright with joy and celebration, their voices raised in songs and cheers that seemed to make the very air vibrate with excitement. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Elderly couples held hands as they watched a scene they had dreamed of witnessing for years. Veterans of military service stood at attention as their new king passed by. The diversity of the crowd reflected modern Britain in all its complexity. People of every background, every faith, every walk of life united in this moment of celebration and hope for the future. The palace gates came into view, and Catherine felt her heart rate increase as she realized that in moments they would be standing on the famous balcony, waving to the crowds as king and queen for the first time. The balcony where she had stood as a new bride over a decade earlier, where she had celebrated jubilees and state occasions, would now welcome her as the nation's queen. As the coach passed through the palace gates, the crowds pressed even closer to the railings, their enthusiasm reaching fever pitch as they caught their final glimpses of the new monarchs before they disappeared into the palace courtyard. The sound of their cheers seemed to follow the coach through the gates, a reminder of the support and affection that would sustain William and Catherine through the challenges and responsibilities that lay ahead. Palace staff lined the courtyard as the coach came to a stop, their faces reflecting the same mixture of pride and emotion that had marked the entire day. Many of these men and women had served the royal family for decades, witnessing the transformation of the shy young prince and his university girlfriend into the confident king and queen who now stepped down from the Golden State coach. The palace itself seemed to welcome them home, its familiar corridors and rooms now taking on new significance as the official residence of King William V and Queen Catherine. The private apartments they had known as the Prince and Princess of Wales would now serve as the heart of their operation as monarchs, the place where they would balance their public duties with their roles as parents and partners. Their children were waiting inside, having been brought from the Abbey in a separate car to ensure their comfort and safety. George, Charlotte, and Louis rushed to greet their parents, their faces glowing with excitement at the day's events, but also with the simple joy of being reunited with their mother and father after the most important morning of their young lives. "Mummy, you look like a real queen," Charlotte exclaimed, her innocent words bringing tears to Catherine's eyes and laughter to everyone within earshot. The comment perfectly captured the surreal nature of the transformation they had all undergone, from a normal family living an extraordinary life to the royal family at the very heart of the nation's identity and future. The moment of family reunion was brief but precious, a reminder that beneath all the ceremony and protocol, they were still the same people who loved each other, supported each other, and found joy in the simple moments of connection that make life meaningful. The crowns on their heads had not changed the fundamental relationships that anchored their lives in love and mutual respect. As they prepared to step out onto the balcony for the traditional appearance before the crowds, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every challenge had strengthened her, every responsibility had prepared her, every moment of doubt had ultimately led to greater confidence in her ability to serve with dedication and grace. The balcony doors opened, and the roar of the crowd waiting in the palace gardens and stretching down the mall hit them like a physical force, a reminder that their reign would be shaped not just by their own desires and intentions, but by the hopes and expectations of millions of people who looked to them for leadership, inspiration, and stability in an uncertain world. The iconic red curtains of the Buckingham Palace balcony parted, and King William and Queen Catherine stepped into the golden afternoon light to face their subjects for the first time as crowned monarchs. The roar that erupted from the thousands gathered below was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced, a sound that seemed to rise from the very soul of the nation, carrying with it decades of hope, tradition, and genuine affection for the royal family. Catherine felt the weight of the moment settle around her like a mantle as she looked out over the sea of faces stretching as far as the eye could see. The mall was packed with people from every corner of the United Kingdom and beyond, their upturned faces bright with joy and their voices raised in celebration. Union Jack flags fluttered like colorful butterflies above the crowd, creating a tapestry of patriotism that took her breath away. Beside her, William stood with the bearing of a king, but the warmth of the man she had fallen in love with at university. His hand found hers, and they stood together on the balcony that had welcomed generations of monarchs, from Queen Victoria to Elizabeth II, each leaving their own mark on history while maintaining the continuity that made the monarchy such a stabilizing force in British life. The children joined them on the balcony, George standing with the dignity befitting the future heir to the throne, while Charlotte and Louis waved enthusiastically at the crowds below. Their presence reminded everyone that this coronation was not just about the present, but about the future of the monarchy, the next generation who would carry forward the traditions and values that had sustained Britain through centuries of change. As Catherine waved to the crowds, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this balcony. The shy girl from Berkshire who had once worried about speaking in public was now acknowledged by millions as their queen. Every challenge she had faced, every criticism she had weathered, every moment of self-doubt had been part of her preparation for this ultimate test of character and commitment. The RAF flyover approached from the distance, the sound of jet engines adding to the symphony of celebration that surrounded the palace. As the red arrows streaked overhead in perfect formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky, the crowd's cheers reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient building behind them. Catherine caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd below, royal watchers who had followed her story from the beginning, photographers who had documented her evolution from university student to queen, well-wishers who had sent letters of support through the years. Their presence reminded her that this moment belonged not just to her and William, but to everyone who had believed in their ability to serve with honor and dedication. The balcony appearance continued for several minutes, each wave and smile captured by hundreds of cameras and broadcast to millions of viewers around the world. Catherine knew that these images would become part of history, studied and cherished by future generations seeking to understand this pivotal moment in the monarchy's long story. When they finally stepped back inside the palace, the contrast between the public spectacle and private reality was striking. Away from the crowds and cameras, they were once again simply a family celebrating an extraordinary achievement. The crowns came off, the formal robes were carefully stored away, and they gathered in their private apartments to share a quiet moment together. King Charles III joined them for an informal family gathering, his eyes bright with pride and relief at seeing the successful completion of the transition he had worked toward his entire life. "Your mother would be so proud," he said to William, his voice thick with emotion as he thought about Princess Diana and how she would have celebrated this moment. The afternoon brought a series of private meetings with close advisors and family members, each offering their congratulations and discussing the practical aspects of beginning their reign. Catherine found herself in conversations about everything from ceremonial duties to charitable patronages, from state visits to constitutional responsibilities that would shape their calendars for years to come. As evening approached, the formal coronation banquet awaited, bringing together dignitaries from around the world for a celebration that would mark the official beginning of their reign. Catherine changed into an evening gown that sparkled with diamonds and embroidery, its elegance befitting the occasion while reflecting her personal style and grace. The state dining room at Buckingham Palace had been transformed for the occasion, with flowers from across the Commonwealth adorning every table and place settings that included some of the most precious pieces from the royal collection. Representatives from dozens of nations gathered to toast the new king and queen, their presence a reminder of Britain's continued importance on the world stage. During the banquet, Catherine found herself in conversations with presidents and prime ministers, fellow royals, and distinguished guests who offered their best wishes for the reign ahead. Each exchange reminded her of the diplomatic responsibilities that came with her new role, the need to build relationships that would serve Britain's interests while advancing causes close to her heart. The speeches that evening were filled with hope and optimism for the future, references to the challenges facing the world and the leadership that Britain could provide under its new monarchs. Catherine listened to each tribute with growing understanding of the weight of expectations that rested upon their shoulders, but also with confidence in their ability to meet those expectations with wisdom and grace. As the formal celebrations wound down, William and Catherine found themselves alone on a palace terrace, looking out over the lights of London. The city stretched away into the distance, millions of lights representing millions of lives that would be touched by their reign in ways both large and small. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Catherine asked, her voice soft in the evening air. The question that had haunted her thoughts for months finally found expression in this moment of quiet reflection. William considered her words carefully before responding. "I think readiness is something we'll discover along the way," he said. "What I know for certain is that we're committed to serving with everything we have, and we'll face whatever comes together." The wisdom in his words reassured Catherine, reminding her that their strength had always come from their partnership, their ability to support each other through challenges and celebrate together in moments of triumph. The crown might have changed their titles, but it had not changed the fundamental relationship that anchored their lives. Looking back over the day's events, Catherine felt a deep sense of completion combined with anticipation for what lay ahead. The coronation had marked the end of one chapter in their lives, but the beginning of another that would be filled with opportunities to serve, to lead, and to make a positive difference in the world. The letters that would arrive in the coming days from children inspired by the ceremony, families grateful for the stability the monarchy provided, and communities around the world celebrating this moment of hope and continuity would remind them daily of the real impact their service could have on individual lives. As they prepared to retire for the evening, Catherine took one last look at the crown that now sat safely in its case, waiting for the next state occasion when it would once again rest upon her head. The weight of precious metals and stones was nothing compared to the weight of responsibility it represented, but she felt ready to carry that burden with grace, dignity, and unwavering commitment to the people she now served as queen. The coronation was complete, but the reign of King William V and Queen Catherine had only just begun. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to prove worthy of the trust placed in them by millions of people who looked to the monarchy for leadership, stability, and inspiration. In her heart, Catherine knew that the shy girl from Berkshire was gone forever, replaced by a woman ready to serve her nation and the Commonwealth with every ounce of strength, wisdom, and love she possessed. The crown had not changed who she was at her core, but it had revealed the queen she had been becoming all along, step by step, challenge by challenge, year by year, until this moment when destiny and preparation finally converged in perfect harmony. The new queen closed her eyes and felt the presence of all those who had supported her journey to this moment: family, friends, mentors, and even critics who had helped shape her into the leader she had become. Tomorrow the real work would begin, but tonight she could rest in the knowledge that she and William were ready to face whatever the future might bring, together as partners in the greatest adventure of service their lives could offer.